I've written recently at The Last American Vagabond, of course, which is where I contribute weekly articles. And this is a thread, I feel like, honestly, and I need to make a post about this to make it easier to digest, but I feel like since the 2024 election and really before that, there's been about probably 10 articles at this point that I've written that are kind of a series of articles. Like they're all not specifically, on the same topic, but they're interrelated and they're about the technocrats and they're about the Trump administration. So I wrote one a while back about Elon Musk and the Starshield program, the satellite program, spy satellite program that SpaceX is helping do. I did the, Zionist versus technocrats election 2024. That one was telling people ahead of time what we should expect from either candidate. And here we are, Trump is a Zionist, listening to technocrats, surrounded by technocrats and Zionists. And then I also did an article called Meet the Peter Thiel Acolytes in the Second Trump Administration. I did an article about Meet the Man Who Influenced Peter Thiel, about Curtis Yarvin. And then I did an article about Doge and the efficiency movement, which preceded the technocracy movement. These are all kind of building up on a theme, and I would place these two articles in that theme. This newest one is called Welcome to the Palantir World Order. It's actually about 2 weeks old, so if you haven't seen it, go read it ASAP. I've been wanting to write this one for a while, and unfortunately, as time has gone on, it has just become easier to write it because there's just literally so much Palantir incest going on with the Trump administration. As Palantir stock rises and their profile in the second Trump administration is cemented, it's becoming clear we are living in the Palantir world order. How does a company with CIA ties, yes, Palantir was helped and started by the CIA, and two steering committee members of the secretive Bilderberg Group as founders end up in the White House? That's Alex Karp and Peter Thiel, who are steering committee members of the Bilderberg Group. This question should be on the minds of every free-thinking person, regardless of political affiliation or lack thereof. The answer to this question cuts to the heart of understanding the future direction of the American experiment and the impact it will have on the rest of the world. Starting in 2019, I began warning that we are witnessing the creation of a technocratic state with big tech CEOs amassing exorbitant wealth and unfathomable data about the world. This collection of financial wealth and data has allowed these technocrats to gain power equivalent to many nations and beyond that of smaller nations. Palantir is a perfect example of the merging of corporate and state power. They were founded by Peter Thiel and Alex Karp long before they were made steering committee members of the Bilderberg Group. Karp and Thiel launched Palantir with seed funding from the CIA's venture capital firm Enquetel. The CIA aimed to use Palantir to relaunch the post-9/11 controversial program known as Total Information Awareness, or TIA, which was shut down because of public outcry in the post-9/11 world. However, after that, Peter Thiel and Karp started meeting with intelligence officials, which helped them develop Palantir, so Palantir could do privately, quote unquote privately, because it's basically a government corporation, what the government could not get permission to do publicly by the American people. Over the last 120 days, it has become clear that Palantir is all up in there, and they are now, along with Elon Musk, the U.S. government's new favorite military-industrial complex contractor of choice. And I just go through a few things here. I'm not going to read this whole article. I'll get to some important pieces. But you got the SpaceX Palantir Golden Dome over America. Did you know that? That Elon Musk's SpaceX and Palantir and Anduril Industries, which is another Peter Thiel organization, have said that they're going to contract with the Trump administration to build the Golden Dome missile defense shield. This is supposed to be like Israel's Iron Dome, but it's the Golden Dome in America because it's the golden age. Trump has called for America to have a, quote, dome defense system similar to that of Israel's. Anduril was founded by Trump donor Palmer Luckey with funding from Palantir CEO Peter Thiel. So, three companies meeting together, talking to the Trump officials about building and launching between 400 and 1,000 satellites to detect missiles and track their movements. This would be combined with 200 attack satellites with missiles and lasers to bring down enemy missiles. Despite these sources telling Reuters that the SpaceX group is not expected to be involved in the weaponization of satellites, as I said earlier, you can look at my recent reporting or from a couple months ago about the Starshield program, which absolutely shows that this is about weaponization of satellites and that privacy is pretty much all but gone. And this is not really surprising because, as I previously reported, in 2024, Palantir, Anduril, SpaceX, and OpenAI announced that they were partnering together on U.S. military contracts. And they are trying to basically replace the old guard of the military-industrial complex. That would be Lockheed, Raytheon, Boeing, companies like that. Then you also got the fact that Palantir is helping the Trump administration locate immigrants using their AI. I know some of you are going to celebrate that until it's being used against you, but it's not a good thing. there's already a $95 million contract between Palantir and the U.S. Homeland Security investigations. And this is a $30 million contract. Now they're helping them develop a new operating system called Immigration OS. So the relationship with Palantir and ICE is growing. And not only that, remember the IRS? People were talking about they're going to abolish the IRS, or Trump was claiming that, or at least some of his people were fooled into thinking that's what he said. Well, they're not going to abolish the IRS. In fact, they're going to have the External Revenue Service for tariffs, maybe they've talked about. But also, they're going to try to make the IRS more efficient. And I know that some people are like, good, we need a more efficient IRS, where myself and others like, yeah, how about we just abolish it? Taxation is theft. It was always illegal, immoral, unconstitutional. It should have never started to happen in the first place. So let's not make it more efficient. Let's just get rid of it. But Wired has reported that Doge is working with Palantir to build a, quote, new mega API for IRS records. And this basically would allow them to exchange different information between different agencies to, again, try to make the IRS more efficient in different ways. And so Palantir is part of that effort to, bring the IRS under that AI fold. And it's interesting because, as I note here, that while Trump supporters may have previously been concerned that the Biden administration planned to hire thousands of more IRS employees, an agency which many Americans detest, it seems that under the second Trump administration, Palantir will help make the agencies more efficient than ever. So much for abolishing the IRS. So Peter Thiel is also involved in nuclear energy. There's this company that he's working with called General Matter. Now he's trying to get the U.S. to rebuild and strengthen and make more efficient the uranium enrichment industry and make these small nuclear reactors. And of course, that's not happening in a bubble. The reason that's happening is because they recognize how much they need faster data centers in order to build the AI networks that they want and the technocratic future they want. They need more data centers, cooling the servers that are running everything. And one way to power these servers, people are learning, is potentially nuclear power. There's more here. There's talking about the government's payment system. Peter Thiel is involved with that with a company called Ramp. Of course, you got the blind support for Israel and that continuing ongoing thing there. And then, as I said, I've been able to find that there are at least 10 influential people and influential positions who are directly related to Peter Thiel and Palantir. That's what I reported previously. That includes J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, David Sachs, who's the AI and crypto czar, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, Jim O'Neill, who we're going to talk about in just a few moments, actually, Ken Howry, U.S. Ambassador to Denmark, Jacob Helberg, Michael Kratzios, who's a science advisor. And then since that time, I found some more reporting that actually started to, they weren't really focused on trying to find the Peter Thiel connection, but what they reported on did reveal some more Peter Thiel connections. And one of them was from the New York Times. The New York Times mentions a man named Akash Boba, who's one of the young coders working with Musk. This guy also used to intern with Palantir. Then you got Business Insider talking about a Doge employee working at NASA. And they said that this employee, 26-year-old Riley Sennett, was listed as a senior advisor in an internal NASA directory. And he basically left his calendar, his Google Calendar, public, so they were able to check out a lot of his meetings. And it's clear in some of those meetings in March 2024, he was meeting with the Founders Fund, which is, put together by Peter Thiel. The calendar also had a May recruiter call with Palantir specifically, and then another April meeting with Andrill, which is also, again, run and connected by Peter Thiel. And the calendar also showed 2024 meetings with Thrive Capital, which is a VC firm run by Jared Kushner's brother and funded by Peter Thiel. So there's just so many Peter Thiel connections. But then after that, there was another report, this time from Bloomberg, which found even more connections than I originally found. It found the same ones, but a little bit more. And that includes, I'm not going to list these names because most of them won't mean anything to you. These are just different bureaucrats and people who are working in Doge in different ways that are former Palantir employees, former software engineer at Palantir, formerly of Andrill, formerly at Palantir, formerly Palantir, former Thiel fellow, received political donations from Thiel, formerly Andrill. This means that there are at least 18 Peter Thiel acolytes in Trump's cabinet and in Doge. So that is why I called this article the Palantir World Order. So I'm just going to read you guys this last section, and we'll look at one more article related to Palantir and Peter Thiel. We're going to talk about Jim O'Neill as well. So let's go back to my original question. How does a company with CIA ties and two steering committee members of the secretive Bilderberg Group as founders end up in the White House? This is no small curiosity. We are witnessing the MAGA movement, which largely believes it is the resistance to the global elite, capitulate and make excuses as Trump stocks his cabinet with members and attendees of the Bilderberg Group, the World Economic Forum, and the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders Program. The Bilderberg attendees who meet in secret every May are the representatives of the true ruling class. The fact that two members of the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group, Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, are running Palantir and collecting an increasing number of military-industrial complex contracts is a clear sign that Trump is not fighting the deep state. That Palantir is now even further integrated to the U.S. government via Trump should alarm all Americans. It should also alarm residents of nations around the world who value privacy and individual liberty. And in fact, recently a Palantir employee, he came forward and spoke kind of his concerns. He said, quote, "We're at the brink of using these technologies potentially to run our government, to run our battlefields and our personal lives, using artificial intelligence as a sort of panacea solution across our federal departments. And especially when they're again wielded by people with a very distinct agenda, it puts everyone at risk." And what is that agenda? The agenda promoted by Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and Alex Karp and their friends in the Trump administration is not America first. It is not about individual liberty, freedom of speech, and freedom from invasive technologies. It is an anti-human technological progress at all costs, technocratic agenda, which will result in the end of human liberty if we do not resist. And how does this happen? It happens because many of you out there just keep putting your faith in politicians and thinking that if you vote for one evil over the other, you're going to get something other than evil. Or if you vote for one Zionist over the other, it might be slightly better. And sure, you could keep trying to make those arguments, but meanwhile, the pieces of individual liberty and the Constitution, for whatever it's worth, are being chipped away at, and we're moving closer and closer to the technocratic world order while you scream, "At least it's not Kamala, at least it's not Kamala." One other one on this, my more recent article, Palantir partners with NATO on the controversial AI project Maven. You guys may remember Project Maven from a couple of years ago. This was a project by the Department of Defense and Google originally, who was helping AI, working with AI, and they were using it for drones and things like that. There was a big walkout of Google employees in 2018, and Google actually stepped away. Palantir stepped in, and they were happy to step in. And so they've worked on it since then. And now NATO, not just the US government, but NATO, the North American Treaty Organization, or the North American Terrorist Organization, depending on your flavor, is now working with Palantir to acquire the Maven smart system as part of NATO's effort to complete a digital transformation. And this is just more Peter Thiel, Alex Karp connections here, there, and I'm not going to read that one to you, but both of those will be in the show notes. Now, before we go into our next story in just a moment, I do want to pause here to say that I mentioned Jim O'Neill, and Jim O'Neill is one of these Thiel Foundation fellows who's worked with Peter Thiel. He's there now. He was nominated by Trump when I first wrote those as the Deputy Secretary of the HHS, and of course, HHS is where Robert F. Kennedy serves. Well, now, as of, I think, just last week, let me see. Did it not load? Let me see real quick. So he was nominated, and now he has been confirmed as of just last week. And I just want to show you guys a quick clip. Again, this guy's got numerous Peter Thiel connections, and he is right under RFK as Deputy Secretary. But people like myself and Whitney Webb, who wrote a big expose on him a couple months ago, have been warning that this guy might have been put there in place to sort of keep an eye on RFK. And I think RFK is a big, disappointment in a lot of different ways. Some people are pointing to positive things like placebo trials they're calling for, discussions on autism and stuff like that. But they're also still out there recommending the measles shots. I've been sharing that on social media. RFK was on Dr. Phil last week. We're going to talk more about that in a second. And he pretty much all but said, like, yes, I recommend the shots. Okay, we're going to study them. But yes, we do recommend them. And I think it's just him talking out of both sides of his mouth. But maybe some of you see it differently. Nevertheless, I'm going to show you a quick clip from Jim O'Neill's confirmation hearing just last week, or actually just like 4 days ago. And this is the Peter Thiel associate. Check out what he has to say here about vaccines.
Thank you for the question, Senator. As you know, I'm an advisor to a vaccine company. I'm very much in favor of vaccines. I think vaccines are one of the greatest public health interventions in human history. They've saved millions of lives. They will continue to save millions of lives.
They will continue to save millions of lives. I guess that's arguable, debatable. if you've read Susan Humphrey's Dissolving Illusions, you might have a different opinion and might realize vaccines are pretty much all but unnecessary. And then, so the guy's a vaccine advisor. He supports the childhood schedule. And I said these same things. I was saying, hey, RFK, during his confirmation hearing, he also told them, I support the childhood vaccine schedule. I'm not going to do anything about it, et cetera. And I was told by many people, I'm just being blackpilled. I'm being negative. He's got to play the game. This is why you don't understand politics, Derrick, blah, blah, whatever. It's so funny. But I don't know. How do you explain that, Maha? You've got a Peter Thiel acolyte in there saying he is a vaccine advisor. He supports the childhood schedule. Vaccine saves lives. And now he's the deputy secretary of HHS under RFK.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.